This is Quinton Simon, at about 1.5 years old, a little bit over that, 20 months. Like all children, he was blameless, he was innocent, and he was beautiful. And like all children, he was totally defenseless, totally and completely dependent on the adults in his life to take care of him and to look out for his safety. And the evidence in this case will show that the defendant violated that trust, that most basic, sacred trust of a parent. Got in her car with his body, drove to a dumpster, and threw him away like a piece of trash. She would go home, go to sleep like everything was normal, and wake up the next morning and report it to the police as an abduction. I woke up, my front door was open, and my child was missing. Now the story started to fall apart pretty quickly because of good, solid police work. But she would go on to tell a series of evolving lies over several weeks, only moving from one lie to the next as the police picked apart the first lie and presented her with the evidence that made the first lie untenable. So now it's time to move on to lie number 2, and 3, and 4. And as they're doing this with her, they're also searching for his body, which they ultimately discovered about 6 weeks after his disappearance in a local landfill, in pieces, unfortunately. And as a result of all of that police work and investigative efforts, which I think you'll be quite proud of when you hear about them in detail, the defendant is charged with his murder. So that's sort of the 50,000-foot view, the bluff, the bottom line up front for the military folks here. A little more detail on what happened, what the evidence will show. The 2 days that we're primarily concerned with here are October 4th and 5th of 2022, specifically the night of October 4th, moving into the morning of October 5th. At that time, the defendant is living here on the west side of Savannah. He most recently lived in North Carolina, where she had met and lived with her most recent boyfriend. And some months before October of 2022, they had moved down and were living in this house. The house belonged to the defendant's mother, Billy Joe Howell, her husband, Thomas Howell, who is not the defendant's father, but is her stepfather. Also living in the house, the defendant's brother, Paul Simon. They have the same mother and the same father. And Daniel Youngkin, her boyfriend from North Carolina, and the defendant's 3 children. October of 2022, she has 3 children by 3 different men. The oldest is Zane Morton. I think he was roughly about 3 years old at the time. Zane has been through a lot with her. He's her firstborn son, and I expect you'll hear testimony that she considered him her ride or die. That's her guy. Sky Youngkin is an infant on the far right there. That is her youngest child by Daniel Youngkin. And in the middle was Quinton. Quinton was her child by a man named Henry Bubba Moss Jr. You'll hear that she had kind of a tumultuous relationship with Mr. Moss. They had split before she even knew she was pregnant with Quinton, and that he initially didn't even believe that she was pregnant when she told him, and that he was never part of Quinton's life at all. And I expect you'll hear some testimony about the way that background influenced the way that she treated Quinton. But you're supposed to love all your kids equally, you're supposed to treat them all the same. I expect you'll hear some testimony that didn't happen. She treated Quinton differently, and not in a good way. Here's the house from the street. Now, the defendant, Daniel, and the 3 children lived in a bedroom right through this front door. I think there was some sort of addition on the house at one point. This bedroom that they live in appears to be like a converted one-time living room or something like that. If you step through that front door, this is what you see. You see a couch in the foreground. You see a desk behind that. And then on the far wall there, you see a bed. That's the defendant and Daniel Youngkin's bed. If you pan to the right, you'll see a closet door here. And it's hard to make out in this picture, but beyond this closet door is a door into a bathroom that then feeds into the dining room. And that is the only way to get from this room to the main body of the house. You see a race car bed there? That's where Zane slept. If we further pan to the right, you can see that race car bed. And then if you pan into that right-hand corner, you see this pack and play. That's where Quinton slept. That was Quinton's bed. That sort of sets the Before we come back to the morning of October 4th, I want to talk to you about what the evidence is going to show. So far as what's the biggest thing going on in the defendant's life. And the biggest thing going on in her life, in the months, days leading up to October 4th, is the status of her relationship with Danny Youngkin. Things are not good. She is feeling unloved, undesired, ignored. I want to feel beautiful, not barely average. I want to feel loved and not just liked. I want to feel wanted, not just tolerated. Now, this is a 4-minute some video. This video was filmed in August of 2022, but the evidence in terms of the text messages and her statements will show that nothing really changed between when this video was filmed, October 4th of 2022.
Too sky. Pain. Mama tried. Your mama's not here no more because she doesn't love you. I do. I can't love myself. If I can't love myself, how can I love y'all? And Quinton, baby. You middle child. You're so happy all the time. You smile all the time. I wish I could see what kind of man you would be too. And Danny, I loved you. I loved you with all of me, all of my heart. I loved you. You take care of my kids. Okay? You couldn't take care of me. You couldn't love me. You couldn't do me right. So please, for the love of fucking God, do my kids right.
I'm at the river now by Danny. So that's where she was at. This is her emotional state in the summer, fall of 2022. Billy Joe Howell, the defendant's mother, and Thomas Howell, her stepdad, are out of town. They're not in town. They're not in the house. They are sort of out of play. In the morning of October 4th, quite early in the morning, in fact, the defendant and Danny take the 3 children to babysitter Michelle McCarthy. And it comes across more like they're almost like a second family or a substitute family for these kids. And the child care arrangement was this. At this point in time, Danny and the defendant are working at a warehouse in Port Wentworth. And their shift starts at 6 a.m. They're working the 6 a.m. shift. On the way to work, they'll drop off 3 children with Michelle. They clock in at essentially the exact same time, a little after 6 a.m. on October 4th. Now they clock out less than 2 hours later. And the reason they do that is the defendant is experiencing some kind of dental issue. She has a tooth that's bothering her and it needs to come out. And so they clock out right around 8 o'clock, just before 8 o'clock in the morning, and they go to some type of emergency dental clinic or walk-in dental clinic. And she gets a tooth pulled. These are some pictures, selfies she took of herself in the dentist chair, and you can see the side of her mouth on the left side there, I think, is kind of swollen. She sent these to Danny, who was sitting out in the waiting room waiting for her. And so after this, they do not go back to work. They go home. And the rest of the waking hours of the day are pretty normal. They get some lunch. They relax. Her mouth is bothering her. She's tired. She's sore. It's about 4:30 in the afternoon. They go and they pick up the 3 kids from the babysitter from Michelle, and they bring them home. At that point, Danny, the defendant, and the 3 kids are in the house. Now, Paul, he worked at the same warehouse, but he worked a later shift. So same place, different shift. So he's not there in the afternoon. Now they're there. They do dinner. They do bath time. They put the kids down. Quinton in his pack and play. I think a statement from the defendant that Sky, the infant, slept on that couch that we looked at, and Zane in the race car bed. Around 10 p.m., Quinton is fine. He's just in his crib, in his pack and play for that time. Okay. And what happens at this point sets off a chain of events that goes over the next couple hours and results in tragedy. And that is that the defendant and Daniel have yet another argument about how he's treating her. So sometime a little after 10 p.m. And then this is something she told to detectives eventually in some of her interviews about how he doesn't want her, he doesn't want to touch her, he's not feeling desire for her like he used to. And we've already talked about this is a major trigger for her. This is the biggest emotional issue going on in her life, and it's significant. It drove her to the brink in the video that you've watched. This is not a minor thing for her. And so she leaves the house after 10 p.m. on the first of 2 trips that you'll hear a lot about in this trial, and that she didn't really want to talk about, at least truthfully, with investigators. And that first trip is to the drug dealer. She says that She said she left so that things wouldn't escalate between her and Danny. She was upset, that's her word. So it wouldn't escalate. The first place she goes is this Circle K, and I should have pointed out that you can see her getting out of the car. So about 10:30, I'll back up. You can see her getting out of her Dodge Journey with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Then she texts Danny. He's got her saved in his phone as Lanny Baby. She texts him, I'm going to run to 204, I guess. That's at 10:32. And 204 is an area you'll hear about in this case. It's shorthand for our drug dealer. I'm going to run to our drug dealer. Screenshot of some GPS plots from her phone that the police eventually made after getting into her phone. You see Highway 204 here. And this red blob up here is a series of GPS points showing that she's at the drug dealer's house on Arkwright Lane from about 10:45 p.m. to 10:55. And she's scoring drugs to use that night because she doesn't like the way she's feeling. While she's gone, Paul gets home. He had clocked out at 9:56 p.m. He was smoking a blunt in the parking lot or something like that. You're going to hear a lot about drug use in this case. And he gets home while the defendant is still out on this trip to the drug dealer. And he'll tell you that when he got home, he went in and said hey to Danny. And he saw the kids, he saw Quinton in his crib, in his pack and play. Quinton was fine. He even interacted with him a little bit. But he's there and he's okay. Now, by 10 after 11, she's got a bunch of GPS points hitting at the house on Buckhalter Road. And this is just to signify that this is around when she gets home. 10 after 11. Paul is upstairs in his bedroom, going to sleep, kind of secluded from the rest of the family. And Danny eventually goes to sleep as well. And you'll hear her say this to the investigators, that she was the only one up and active in the middle of the night, in the hours leading up towards 1 a.m. My tooth was hurting. I couldn't sleep. What she's doing is she's going on a bender. You'll hear her admit to this eventually. She didn't want to talk about it initially, but you'll hear that she eventually acknowledged that she was up kind of frantically using drugs. You'll hear her talk about it. I would hit a line, I would go outside, I would smoke a blunt to kind of bring myself down, maybe smoke a cigarette, then I'd hit another line and repeat the cycle. So she's in her house by herself, physically uncomfortable because of her dental issue, emotionally wrecked because of what's going on with her and Danny. It's just an ever-present problem for her. And this is a bad situation. Right? This is a volatile, dangerous situation. And that's because you'll hear something that she later said during the investigation on a recorded phone call to Daniel, who was cooperating with the police and trying to help them gain information about the effect that cocaine has on her. It's not just fun for her. You'll hear her say that it makes her angry and impulsive.
I become angry and impulsive when I'm like.
And so those are the conditions. She's up all alone, physically uncomfortable, emotionally unhappy, unstable to some degree. And around 1 a.m. probably, she kills Quinton. That's the Dodge Journey in the driveway at the time of the police response. She goes up to her armed with this information about the flock hits at night. He wants to know what these trips were about. So he goes up to her and he asks her, hey, did you go anywhere last night? And he's a savvy guy, so he's careful to tack on, like where the kidnapper could have followed you home. And she seems to know, the evidence will show that she seems to know that he knows something about this trip to Azalea that she took and has not mentioned to this point. And so she comes up with a story. The story is that, that trip that I took away from my house shortly after 1 a.m., that was to go pick up Oragel from a friend at the Chevron. Now the Chevron is right next to Azalea Bogle Plaza. They're kind of right next to each other. And so that's her story. This is what she was doing, driving to that location at that time. This is the first appearance of the Oragel story, which lasts for about a week or so. She's trying to show him on her phone this trip on an app called Life 360. Look, if this trip was so sinister in nature, why is she trying to show it to him on her phone? The Chevron and Azalea Bogle Plaza are right next to each other. And looking at the screen, you can't necessarily tell which one she's at. Now, the police would later pull very precise GPS data from the phone that puts her not at the Chevron, but right at the dumpsters at Azalea. So that's the first appearance of the Oragel story to explain the Azalea trip. And she omitted that to Wilkins, has now had to come up with a story to cover this trip.
My wife was really bothering me about it was 1 in the morning to call certain parents to see if they got Oragel. So I got caught up with another one of my friends named Misty that I used to work with. He has a lot of mouth problems and asked her if she had any Oragel. Like I remember the Chevron and I called her and got back home. Also 12 minutes. I got it for like 360. I can show you all right around. Everything was on the windows here. Yeah, turn my mouth, check it all, get in there, okay.
Now, couple things about this initial interview in which she's asked to give an account of her movements for the last 24 hours. No mention whatsoever of the trip to the drug dealer. She doesn't want to talk about what she was doing that night in the state that it put her in. So that's omitted completely from this interview. And now she's put a name to the friend who gave her the orgeat, Misty. The police asked her to go through her phone, so she lets them go through her phone. A couple things they see is there's no call to Misty, and there's no call to Circle K to check and see if they have orgeat, which is something she said. They also see a message from the defendant to Danny. This is when she's leaving the Circle K and is about to go to the drug dealer at 10:30, gonna run to 204, I guess. This is something that she had left out in this initial interview with Snyder and Lemons. Here's what she tells him. It was a trip to the drug dealer, but it wasn't actually to buy drugs. She tells him that the reason that she left the house at 10:30 at night and went to her drug dealer and was there for 10 minutes was simply to pay off a pre-existing drug debt in the amount of $20. The evidence will show that that story is just absurd on its face. But in addition to that, the cash out was for $80, not $20. And she'll later admit that this story wasn't true.
And just return on 204 to meet it.
Yeah, like I'm turning on 204 now, like I'm not meeting him. That's what I was trying to tell him.
And at that point, you didn't get anything.
Because after all, she tells him, other than marijuana, I don't use drugs. And the reason they're asking her whether she got a Percocet from the drug dealer that night is that they had seen some messages about buying Percocets as well when they went through her phone. Messages with you look like you're buying Percocet, using Percocet. And her story at this time is, oh, those are for a friend. I'm just the middleman. She does not want to talk about her drug use that night because that contributed directly to the state of mind that she was in and relates so closely to her killing Quinton in the middle of the night. So she feels that she has to tell these lies. And she wants to focus on 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. because after all, this is an abduction. It's not as though I did anything in the middle of the night. My child was taken after Danny left for work. That's her story, that's what she's trying to sell. October 5th, they get statements from the defendant, where she's making all these claims that we talked about. They get a statement from Paul, they get a statement from Danny. And so they go out and there are two real notable things that happen between the October 5th statements on day one and the next interview. And one is that they do what they call a video canvas. They go out to this Chevron area where she has said that this orgeat exchange happened. They go in and they ask if there's footage. And they get footage from the Chevron, and it does not show her stopping there. In fact, it shows her driving by. And they get footage from Azalea next door. What the Azalea footage shows is her pulling in, doing a loop around the complex, and pulling up to the dumpsters and sitting there for about 2 minutes. And that's when she throws Quinton's body away. This is her driving in the Dodge Journey after 1 a.m. on a mission to throw away her dead child. And they confront her with these two findings. One, the security footage from Azalea and from Chevron. And two, what Missy has told them. And she just sticks to the orgeat story and just insists that it is true. And this is what that sounded like.
Okay, because Missy had talked to you.
Yeah, she has.
She hasn't talked to you in quite some time.
Yeah, she has.
She did not have a conversation with you about the orgeat.
So that's the story on October 8th, sticking to her guns. Now, October 12th, she comes in for another interview. And she tells this kind of flowery story describing this meeting. She lavishes them with details about how this went down.
See what Missy's house, and you go inside her house, she was just saying how long did y'all interact there? Missy, how long did y'all?
2 minutes of quick little conversation. Everyone else in the house doing this one. She does some practice, but she did how much of that side.
Now she has Misty was smoking crack when she gave the defendant the orgeat. The evidence will show that she added this detail to suggest a faulty memory on Misty's part. It didn't happen. So after insisting on the 5th that she met Misty at the Chevron for orgeat, and after insisting on the 8th that was the truth, and after insisting even at the outset of this interview that it was true, she finally admits that it wasn't true and massages the inconsistency by saying, I didn't speak to her. You've asked me if I threw any trash away there. Yeah, I did throw some trash away. There's a story for what that trash was. The evidence will show she did not want to admit that it was Quinton's body, so she describes this trash that she threw away as stinky shrimp pasta that had been sitting in the car in a trash bag and smelling up the car.
The whole person was standing there, so what is that smell? I felt like before I even went to a floor. You know, I go up there, I'm like, get out of the car.
This is the most critical fact in the case. Throwing Quinton's body in the dumpster at Azalea, what she was doing at Azalea Mobile Home Plaza at 1:17 in the morning or so. He does not want to talk about what was in that trash bag. They also revisit the drug use, and you'll remember that the strong denials on October 5th, which are repeated on October 8th. Well, in this October 12th interview, she admits finally that I did take a Percocet that night.
And you had a Percocet in conjunction with snorting?
Yes, I was like, I don't go outside to a cigarette.
And
By the time
about what time was you done?
I got home, I took it like 11 something.
And so Snyder asked her about her changing story. You've initially, over the course of 2 interviews, didn't mention throwing trash away. And now you got a very detailed account about doing that and what it was. And you are adamant that you hadn't used any drugs other than marijuana. And now you're telling us that you did take a Percocet too. Why is the story changing? And her explanation for that is, oh, well, my faulty memory might have something to do with all the cocaine I was doing that night, which is a drug that had totally been absent from all of her prior accounts and fits much more with the $80 cash app than the story about paying off the drug front. October 12th, and we've come a long way from the October 5th account of only using marijuana that night. This is where we end up on October 12th. She's a regular user of cocaine, which she had denied in earlier interviews. Now, at the end of the day, the most critical thing is what happened to Quinton. What happened to Quinton in the middle of the night. And here is what she had to say about that. I don't know if I did something to him, but if I did, I will take responsibility. It appears to be claiming something like a lack of memory. The evidence that you'll see is going to show that when she drove to those dumpsters at Azalea to throw Quinton's body away, you can see she's driving normally. You'll see that she comes to a complete stop at stop signs. She uses her turn signal. You'll hear evidence that the investigators could tell from her phone that she plugged her phone into the USB charger in the car when she got in. So the evidence will show that she was aware of what she was doing when she took him there, and that her claims to just not know what happened cannot be true. They do not fit with the other evidence. October 18th, police announced that they believe Quinton's body to be in a local landfill, and that they're about to begin this extremely challenging needle in a haystack search of the landfill. And this is how they got there. A detective with the Chatham County Police Department goes out to the mobile home plaza, and he asks what garbage truck company services these dumpsters, and they give him that information. He gets in touch with that garbage truck company, and he learns that it was truck 3909 from a company called Waste Pro. This is on the morning of October 5th, actually. Quinton wasn't in the dumpster for very long because it was empty that day. It's a front-loading garbage truck, extends its hydraulic forks into the slots on the side of the dumpster, and drops Quinton and all the other garbage into the box in the back of the truck. There's a compactor in that truck that compacts everything. You want that compactor in there so that the truck doesn't have to go to the landfill as frequently. It makes the garbage smaller and take more garbage. That truck went to the Waste Management Superior Landfill on Little Neck Road on the morning of October 5th. And with this information, the detectives go out and talk to the landfill manager, and he's able to identify the area that garbage was being dumped and then kind of shoved to on October 5th. And this kind of general area up here, that becomes the search area. So they have kind of an idea of like a general box in the landfill of where Quinton is going to be found. But this is still an extremely difficult thing. Even if you know the general area, there's like 2 more days of trash that have since been dumped there since the 5th. And this stuff gets compacted and moved around. They drive these compactors over it that have studded metal rollers, and everything just gets shredded. At the end of the day, they have tons and tons of garbage to search through. And so they arrange the landfill search. They have some consultants from an outside agency come in and advise on this because it's a very technical thing. These consultants are able to tell, based on known rates of searching, estimate of how many people this is going to take and how much time it's going to take. They have to order specialized protective gear, steel-toed boots, Tyvek suits, respirators, gloves to put over the gloves. This is a biohazard environment. And they have to find volunteers, and this is an all-volunteer duty. Right? And for weeks, volunteers from the police department and from some other law enforcement agencies came out here early in the morning, and they do this landfill search that involves an excavator up in the search area, scooping up garbage, putting it in a dump truck. Dump truck comes down on this open area bounded by cones that they call the search deck. The excavator down here kind of spreads the garbage, that particular load, I think they were calling them lines, out onto the search deck. And these volunteers get online with rigs, and they just search through it. This is what that looks like. And they do this for days, weeks, in the heat, all that gear on. These efforts can only be described as heroic. They want to find Quinton. But that's what the police are doing while she is playing games with investigators and changing her story and changing her story again. October 24th, while the landfill search is underway, the defendant is still playing games. This is October 24th, that's 19 days, and after several interviews where her story has just been shot to pieces. She does this interview where she holds herself out as the victim of a child abduction, still on that, and has the goal to make an appeal to the public to just please bring Quinton home safe. And the evidence will show that she knows he's not safe, and she knows he's not coming home. She sends this text message to Savannah Solomon of the FBI, and this is just the latest Hail Mary. After all the statements about going to the Chevron and then going to Ʞᴜ and what she was doing there, and I was actually throwing away trash and not Quinton, October 24th, the same day as that news interview, she and Danny are split. And so now's the perfect time to try to put it on Danny. I'm not lying for Danny anymore. The reason why my story about Oragel and shit didn't make sense was because Danny told me to say that he was the one who left. My phone was in the car from my previous trip. And the reason she says that is her phone GPS puts her at the dumpsters too, not just the video. The evidence will show that it's clearly not true. It was a desperate attempt to just try something new. November 18th, it's a memorable day for the people who are involved in this landfill search because they find Quinton and he's not in good shape. Okay, they find him in pieces. Mostly bones, a foot. It's not as though he's in one place on that search deck. They're finding bones in different lines, spread out. He's horrible. They send Quinton's remains up to the FBI lab at Quantico, Virginia, where DNA analysis is done. They confirm what everybody already knew, is that this is Quinton. And the defendant comes in for one last interview. When they found Quinton after tracing the trash and making it undeniable that what she was throwing away in that dumpster in 괜ᴜ was her son's body, the best she could do in her last interview is to claim a total and complete lack of memory from seeing him in his pack and play at 10-something to snapping back into consciousness on the way home from 괜ᴜ. Now she just can't remember anything that happened during the critical time period in this case, the murder and the disposal of the body. What will the trial look like? Trial's not like an opening statement. All right, we bring witnesses in one at a time. It can be kind of disjointed and choppy because each individual comes in and they can only talk about really their role and what they did, heard, saw, that sort of thing. You'll hear from the investigators who took these statements and followed up on them. You'll hear from some of the people who were involved in this search of the landfill. You'll hear from some of the scientists at Quantico who were tasked with identifying Quinton and seeing what they can make of these remains, which are just totally torn apart. What I do not expect you will hear is exactly how the defendant killed Quinton. And that's because she covered it up. It's because she got rid of the body. All right? The evidence will show that her specific intent from the outset was that he never be found at all. And him being found in pieces, little bitty pieces, was the next best thing. The judge will tell you that in a case like this, we do not have to prove exactly how the defendant killed Quinton. Under these circumstances, how could you? And that is a sensible rule. Because what we have to prove, what is important, is not exactly how she killed him, but that she killed him. The fact that she did it. And the evidence that we will present to you will do that. It will do that, beyond a reasonable doubt. So at the end of the case, when all the evidence is in, we will make our closing arguments, and we will ask you to find her guilty of all.
Using drugs, using marijuana. So last night, was there any chance that you were having some issues with your wisdom teeth and needed to go get something to ease the pain last night?
I did. I went and met up and got Oragel. That was right up there. I met her like at the end of Colton Road, a friend of mine, because I don't have money to go and get some expensive over-the-counter. I don't have it.
And what time was it?
That was like, I got home at 1:25 a.m.
1:25.
I was gone for 12 minutes. You won't let through 6 people. You got it right there.
There's some text messages in your phone. You guys can sample a look at the phone.
Yeah.
To the phone. And there's a message in there. It's an outgoing message from you that says turning on 204. And that's at 10:40.
Yeah.
10:40 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't talk about that before. So what? 10:40 p.m. Where were you at 10:40 p.m.?
If I was turning on 204, I was probably going to go pay back or something. Pay back front from him. To be honest with you, I was going to go pay back the $20 front for him.
For who?
For Danny. Daniel, that's who King is. That's Danny. Whatever. He had $20 a week. I want to pay it back. Whatever. But he was awake at that time. He was up. He was awake at that time. Quinton just went to sleep. He had stopped all the crying and all that stuff. And that's why I left, because he went to sleep at 10:30. You know, and it only takes us 12 minutes to get to 204. If you take 16.
So that would have been important for us to know before. So that's what we have to understand everything. And you have to be kind of open book.
I wasn't
good or bad.
Yeah, it's not like I was trying to be, but I'm trying to replay everything over and over, and I've been doing it all day. All day. I forgot about that. That was not on my mind. My mind is, this is where
Just understand the sequence of events and what happened when. She takes his body and puts it in Guy's journey, and she begins the cover-up. The cover-up is not just the lies to the police. The cover-up starts immediately. A little after 1 a.m., she drives down 광ⴱ Road and comes into ᴜģɪ Road right here, and she pulls into this mobile home plaza. It's right here. Mostly what you're seeing is trees, but there are mobile homes in here. This is Azalea Mobile Home Plaza. There's a convenient stand-up dumpster sort of hidden away under some tree cover in the tree line there. And she throws Quinton's body away like a piece of trash about 1:17 in the morning. She drives home. This is another export from her phone, showing that her phone was locked from 2:01 in the morning until 9:13 in the morning. This is just kind of a shorthand way of saying that's roughly about the time she eventually goes to sleep. Now, Danny wakes up after 5, and he tries to wake her up to go to work. She's supposed to go to work with him. Remember, they work the same shift. And he cannot wake her up. She will not wake up. And he believes that all 3 children are there. He does not go over and check the packet. He doesn't even know that Quinton is gone. He can't wake her up to go to work, and he's annoyed by this because this is not the first time this has happened. And they are kind of tight on money. You're not going to get up and come to work and make money. You're not going to spend money on a babysitter today. And so he texts Michelle, hey, the kids are going to stay here with her today, Miss Michelle, at 5:20 in the morning. She says, okay. So he goes to work, and he clocks in at 6:11, 6 a.m. And he will clock out at 9:15, a little over 3 hours later. At 9:14, 1 minute before the clock out, he gets a call from the defendant. Now, this is a 21-minute call. He calls him, and the cover-up, initially I said the cover-up starts with covering this up to him. Before she covered it up to the police, but before they ever even get involved, she's covering it up to Danny. She calls him and she tells him that she woke up, the front door was open, and Quinton was gone. And he would run out to his car, leave work, and come home, and stay on the line for 21 minutes. And this video shows him running out. That's Danny running out of work. As he's on the way home, on this call with the defendant where she's telling him she woke up and the front door was open, the security system on his house, opened and closed, or just closed, having been open. Front door didn't open until 9:22 in the morning on October 5th. Now that's 6 or 8 minutes in to that call with Danny. And so what the evidence is going to show that she's on the phone with him saying, I woke up and the front door was open, It's during that phone call that she's opening the front door. So you'll hear that she's essentially tampering with the scene, staging the scene to fit with her story before the police ever become involved. Danny gets home, babysitter Michelle got wind that this was going on. He comes over, Paul hears yelling, comes downstairs, and now everybody's there and they're looking for Quinton. And the defendant, of course, is the only person who knows where he actually is, and that's in a dumpster. They call 911, and here's what the defendant says. Police show up a little before 10 a.m., and she repeats the same story to them. This is a missing child. So situations like this, it's all hands on deck. Everybody comes out. Forensics comes out. The forensics unit came out, had a drone up looking for Quinton. Patrol officers are being pulled from other beats, other areas of patrol, to canvass the area and look for Quinton in the woods, because this is a big deal. They take these things very seriously. One of the specialized units that responded after patrol officers had gotten there, John Wilkins shows up, and he's the one who conducts the first, what you call more like the first formal interview with the defendant. Most notable from that statement is when she says she went to bed and when she says she got up. And you'll hear that she tells him, I went to bed around midnight and I got up around 9. She doesn't say anything at all about this trip to Azalea Mobile Home Plaza a little after 1 a.m. She doesn't want to talk about that because that's the trip that she took to get rid of Quinton's body.